this is a topic I have to raise to find some form of closure. I think John Vervaecke is wrong, and this statement might seem absurd without context and too generalizing, but I feel the major takeaway for me after having listened to quite a lot of his content and after having been very hopeful that he might be on the right track of dealing with the meaning crisis and coming up with workable solutions, the major takeaway for me is that what's missing, obviously missing, is that John doesn't really provide us with a sense for what would prove him wrong. Or how would he know if he was wrong? What is kind of a situation where he could point out, hey, if this happened, if this was the case, I would know that I was wrong or I was bullshitting you. He doesn't even, I think, try to come up, even though he's aware of the problem of bullshit, he doesn't explicitly describe what situation would definitely let him know that he's on the wrong path in a given situation. So that he would have a meaningful feedback to course correct and move into a different direction. And without that, I think the whole endeavor is very, very likely to fail. Now, my personal judgment when we're speaking about the meaning crisis is that the very specific challenge we're dealing with is not how to make people happy. If if you want to be happy, just suffer a little before that, and you will be easily prone to experiencing happiness. It's not difficult. If you suffer, it will be very easy for you to find happiness. Also, if you feel disconnected from other people, pain and suffering is a very good way of bringing people together. It's funny, that's something that I don't hear that often from John, but it's not that difficult. I mean, all of these things that are mentioned within the liminal spaces as these huge, impossible challenges, like finding orientation, finding bliss, all of these are easy. If you want bliss, learn to play Bach. It will take you a few years, yes, but then you will have drugs for free for life. That's not difficult. It's not that big of a challenge. Most of these problems we have actually solved. People definitely have figured out ways of living fulfilled life, and you don't have to be a theist to have a fulfilled life, a meaningful life. You don't have to believe in a specific narrative and ideology to have a sense of orientation and a sense of purpose in life. If that's the challenge, these are easy challenges. We can find that. People can find purpose. It's really, most of those are not really that difficult. And we have so many working approaches to all of them. It's just a matter of choosing what to do and just doing it, finding the right kind of community to do it. Again, learn to play Bach and you will have drugs for free for life. And that's really easy. It's not difficult. We don't need to pretend that we have no idea how to get people systematically into higher states of consciousness without literally taking drugs. Of course we know how to do that. That's not a big thing. I don't think that's any of those issues are the really big challenge. The big challenge that we're facing is that for the first time in human history, we are living together with people who are significantly different from us, who view reality in different terms, who use different metaphors, who conceptualize reality in different ways, and we have to figure out a way of coming together with those people and living with those people, being productive with those people. And the challenge is that we can't revert to some of the techniques that we used in the past to overcome similar challenges, like authoritarianism, one of those, war is another one, which brings people together. You will forget all differences between you and your neighbor when you're in war. You will very, very easily come together. Right? And as Joe Biden wisely said, suffering is something that brings people together. Easy. If you want to bring people together, just make them suffer. The thing is, we don't want to use those old methods in many of these cases to bring people together in meaningful ways. And that's the challenge that we're facing. How will you get along with people who are sometimes even not that different from you, and yet you experience them as alter, as somebody else, as someone threatening, as someone who is evil, as someone who needs to be stopped? How do you deal with that reality? And if that's the measure, and this is my suggestion, I think this is one of the crux challenges of the meaning crisis. It has many aspects to it, but this is one of the crucial aspects where I don't think we have very good answers. because it's unique, it's kind of new. We never had to do this in human history. We never had to do it without doing wars. It was always easy. You could always start the next war and the problem is solved. We kind of don't want to do that anymore. So how do you solve that? And if this is the measure by which to judge whether John is on the right track or not, I think he's failing. Just think about what was the voice that he found worthy of being mentioned in a negative way. John is super attentive in trying to be respectful towards other people, trying to embrace their perspective, to listen to them, to take in new information and contradicting information to his own. He's super into trying to challenge himself to embrace other people. And yet, what is one of the voices that he really had to kick and express very strong dissatisfaction with? In one of his lecture series, the only voice he had something negative to say about was Sam Harris. And I think this itself is the expression of the meaning crisis. When you look at Sam Harris's positions, they are easily 80% or even 90% identical to John's positions on the major issues, on the issues that really matter. I know Sam Harris has very problematic views on free will, and I know his conceptions of the self are bogus. Right, okay. But on the really important issues, for example, that you look at scripture as something that's inspiring, as something that you treat much more like literature than like revelation, I think John and Sam have very, very similar positions. Or in the nature of consciousness, that it's something that you have to look at from an interdisciplinary point of view, and that you can't just study it from a third-person perspective. Yada, yada, yada. If you look at all the important questions, you will figure out they have very, very similar views. And yet, who is the person that John Vervaecke experiences as an enemy, as somebody who is counter to his own position? On the one hand, Descartes, and on the other hand, Sam Harris. This is the exact expression of the meaning crisis. When you experience your allies, people who you could get along with perfectly well, when you experience those people as enemies and strangers and foreign, this is the expression of the meaning crisis. And this is exactly the thing that we're here to solve, to figure out a way how to get along across meaningful differences. Because it's not difficult, as John has done, to get together with people who don't have significant disagreements with you on certain issues and be polite and be embracing of their perspectives. But when you're together with people who radically challenge you and have radically different views, and I wouldn't even say that Sam Harris is such a position compared to John. Again, I think they converge on far more issues than on issues that they are radically separated from each other. Even, the notion of mindfulness. Most people don't share both these thinkers' emphasis on mindfulness as being important or meditation being important. Many people wouldn't share the idea that this matters at all, but would insist that believing the right things is far more important than any contemplative practice could ever be. So John here is definitely experiencing somebody as an enemy who is much, much, much closer to himself than easily 80 or 90% of humanity that who would actually face and have to deal with. And when he can't deal with that challenge, when he can't find a way of constructively getting together with Sam Harris and finding a way out of the situation, then to me it's hopeless. Because again, Sam Harris is the easiest challenge. When you have somebody who is almost identical to your own position in the issues where it matters. For example, he accepts you to be an equal interlocutor. He doesn't look down to you as somebody has nothing to say, no matter how learned you might be on an issue, because you don't believe the right things. When you can't get along with such a person, you can by definition not get along with anybody else but yourself. And this is the tragic situation we are in. This is exactly the expression of the meaning crisis, that we don't know how to deal with alterity, with the otherness of other people. And the way we're trying to deal with it in the liminal spaces is by pushing a certain narrative and hoping that the narrative will win over everybody else and will create some kind of cohesion between us. But this is not very likely to work. There will always be differences in how we frame questions. People will always remain diverse in the way they approach different problems. There will always be theists and atheists around. It's not like everybody will become a deist. It's not very likely to happen. People will remain with those differences, and how to navigate those differences, I don't know. I don't see in John's work a really constructive solution and a really constructive modeling for how to do that. And that for me is the fallibility criterion. That for me is the question and the measure by which to actually have a sense for whether you're on the right track or not. If you're failing by that standard, you are failing. No matter how right you might be about individual issues, the big issue remains there. And as long as we don't feel like we're moving into solving that, I think we're not on the right path.